remains mandatory for everyone to have signed in using the Safer WA QR code or the hard copy register. We'll now move on with the meeting. And if I could ask you all to please be upstanding and ask the Deputy Mayor Bianca Sandri to read the opening prayer.
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name.
Amen. And if I could ask you to remain standing, if I could ask Councillor Lagan to please read the acknowledgement of country.
On behalf of councillors, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you. You can take your seats. Please note that without prior approval, any recording of this meeting is prohibited. Members of the public should note that no action should be taken on any resolution of council prior to written advice from the city being received. That takes us to item 1, the official opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting of the 30th of March 2021 open at 7 p.m. Item 2, apologies, I have nil. 3, leave of absence. Councillor Karen Caddy granted a leave of absence for the period 26th of March 2021 to 10th of April 2021 inclusive. And we'll ask for those later, and we'll ask for the amendment later too. Yep. That takes us to item 4, which is disclosure of interest. From the Community and Resources Committee of the 23rd of March, I have Councillor Carlo Perkov disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 ES1, as he is a member of the social media group. The Manager of Engineering Design, Paul Jumov, disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 ES1, as he is a life member and secretary of the Stirling Amateur Football Club, based at Guelph Reserve on Delaunay Street. On the 30th of March, at Council, Councillor David Boothman has disclosed an impartial interest in item 13.1, as he represents Council on the Metro Inner North JDAP, which he will determine the matter. Councillor David Boothman also disclosed an impartial interest in item 13.2, as he represents Council on the Metro Inner North JDAP, which will determine the matter. Councillors, are there any other disclosures? Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 12.1 PRS1, which is acquisition of right-of-way 28082, impartial, as I live adjacent to the right-of-way. 12.1 PRS4, acquisition of right-of-way 28078, impartial, as I live opposite that right-of-way. And 13.2, proposed 28 multiple dwellings. I have a financial interest as I am a co-owner of the company, which is the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Migdale.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I would like to declare or disclose an impartial interest in items 13.1 and 13.2 as I am on JDAP.
Thank you. So noted. Councillor Ree.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to declare 13.1 and 13.2 because I'm a member of JDAP.
Thank you. Councillor Spagnolo.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, I'd like to disclose an interest in 12.1 ES2, which is the Churchlands Green Traffic Management Trial. The type of interest is impartial, and the nature of the interest is I have family attending the local schools.
Thank you. And Councillor Farrelly, 13.1 and 13.2.
13.1 and 13.2 as the Deputy of JDAP as well.
Thank you. And if everyone can obviously fill the paperwork in for that and make sure it's passed on to governance. Any other indications? Item 5, petitions. One petition has been received by the City. Councillor Proud, would you please read out the verified petition?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The following petition containing 89 verified signatures has been received by the City. We, the undersigned electors of Churchlands Avenue, Parkview Green, The Grove and Hibiscus Court in the suburb of Churchlands, WA 6018, request that you expand the morning and afternoon parking restrictions to the whole of Churchlands Estate to prevent 1. Serious injury or death of students crossing Churchlands Avenue to access the bus on Pearson Street. Number 2, inexperienced P-plate drivers causing a danger to other drivers, students and pedestrians while driving at high speed. Number 3, damage to residents' verges, sprinklers, lawns and council curbing. Number 4, abusive and rude behaviour to the residents in this area. Number 5, the wrath of City of Stirling Council rubbish trucks drivers who have difficulty manoeuvring or entering the streets. Number 6, the inability to manoeuvre in and out of our driveways with cars parking opposite on the narrow roads. Number 7, the inability of tradespeople to gain access to our homes to carry out their work. Number 8, the inability of emergency vehicles, including ambulance, police and fire service vehicles, to access emergencies. Number 9, the danger of leaving and entering streets where parked cars reduce the visibility of oncoming traffic. Number 10, the danger of leaving and entering streets when parked cars reduce the narrow street to one lane, forcing drivers to drive on the wrong side of the road toward blind corners. Number 11, the danger to pedestrians pushing prams and strollers and walking with small children and pets alongside the long row of parked cars. Number 12, long-term parking on the very narrow streets that were originally deemed too narrow to have long-term parking. And finally, number 13, wasting the valuable time of residents who have been corresponding with the Stirling City Council for the past 10 years to no avail regarding this matter. Thank you.
Are there any other petitions, councillors? If not, I will ask for a mover and a second to accept the petitions. Move Councillor Rees, seconded Councillor Proud, and if we can just go to the vote, councillors. That is unanimous, thank you. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice, and all questions from the previous council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. Item 7 is public question time. We'll now move on to public question time. To enable all questions to be asked this evening and responded to without the need for multiple extensions of time, could I please request a mover and a seconder for the following motion? Then, in accordance with clause 5.712 of the City of Stirling's Meeting Procedures Local Law 2009, public question time be extended for the time needed to respond to those questions from members of the public who have registered. Move Councillor Sandry, seconded Councillor Perkoff. If you can vote on that, please. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We do have a few to get through tonight, so let's get started. And if I could invite Luke Andrew forward, please. Is there a Luke Andrew? No, if people have submitted questions, by the way, and they're not present tonight, those questions and their answers will appear in the minutes from this meeting. Richard Kilbane. So when you just come forward, on the bottom right-hand corner of your microphone, there should be a button. That's it. And if you can just say your name and address only, and then you can ask your question.
Sure. Richard Kilbane.
Sorry, suburb, just your suburb.
Churchlands. My wife submitted some questions, but I have amended them, so I'm happy to give a copy to the staff to pick them up. So question 1, this is in relation to the Churchlands Green traffic management matter under item 12.1 ES2. Question 1, has consideration been given to the following as an option? Allowing left turn into University Avenue from Empire, i.e. no exit left or right from University into Empire, whilst keeping left and right turns in and out between Pearson and Alumni. If not, could this be considered?
Thank you. Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. The City considered a number of options covering a range of left and right turn restrictions at key intersections. However, the aim of the project is to reduce non-local traffic while still maintaining as much accessibility and permeability for local residents as possible. That being said, if the proposed trials prove unsuccessful and alternative options need to be explored, then this option can certainly be considered further.
Thank you. Question 2, the data on page 25 shows 3,094 vehicles per day were using University Avenue, which is only marginally above the 3,000 vehicles a day recommended by Main Roads for a local road. And during the trial, this has been halved. Why, therefore, is a further trial required when we actually have an acceptable outcome now?
Mr Littleton.
Look, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, essentially, this trial has been proposed because we've received concerns, particularly around the illegal left turn movements that were restricted as part of the trial at Pearson. We believe that that we can still achieve a relative reduction in rat-running traffic by initiating both the restrictions that have been proposed in this trial. So essentially, we believe that this will create, or potentially will create, a better outcome, which is why we sought to trial it.
Thank you.
On page 39, points 10 and 11, I'd actually invite the councillors to read this. The closure at university and alumni intersections clearly states that traffic will be redistributed onto local roads and create negative amenity for residents and possible problems for emergency vehicles. On this basis, why on earth would council consider proceeding with the recommendation as proposed?
And the item is obviously on the agenda this evening, and council have debated it at committee, and they will also consider it this evening, sir. Tracy King. Is Tracy here? George Aitken? Just your name and your suburb. Sorry, just to put it back on for me. That's it.
My name's George Aitken. I live in Churchlands Green.
Sir, could you just pull that microphone down a little bit? Thanks.
George Aitken, and I live in Churchlands Green. My question is on behalf of Sam Cronje, who couldn't be here tonight. Also for the traffic management through Churchlands Green. Are the councillors aware that the Churchlands Green is the narrowest separation between Pearson and Empire Avenue distributor roads, and therefore will always be attractive as a rat run for non-residential traffic, even more so with the extension to Stevenson Avenue, and if these proposed modifications do not occur?
Thank you. Mr. Littleton.
Only to say, certainly the council is aware, and the reports clearly articulate the attractiveness of the routes through university and alumni. So, so council is certainly aware. They have also received many deputations and approaches, and they'll consider that matter tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen Aitken, please.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name's Helen Aitken and I live in Churchlands Green. So are the councillors aware that the residents are in support, the majority of residents are in support of the new trial as per the officer's recommendation and the committee recommendation option 1 and 3? Closure of the right-hand turn into alumni for 12 weeks, with closure of the right-hand turn from Empire into University starting at week 7 of the 12-week trial. So the word to note here is it is a trial, okay? Lots of man-hours and extensive surveys and assessments have been done, and the officers, with all the officers, and we thank them. The minor inconvenience to residents far outweighs the greater gain of the whole of the estate. The estate is local access road only, yet we have semi-trailers, fuel tankers and double-decker buses constantly running through the estate. I will also be inconvenienced, but getting into the estate, but for the minute extra time it takes to get home, it's really a no-brainer. I also bought into the estate for the lifestyle, the parkways and the green element of Churchlands Green, and our roads are far from that. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And look, the council is very aware there's support for the trials, but the council is also very aware from the many emails received over the last week that it is something that's of community concern, and there's different views, and they'll try to do their best tonight to take all that into account.
Thank you.
Thanks. Paul McGovern.
Good evening, I'm Paul McGovern and I'm also from Churchlands Green. I want to speak in support of the trial 1 and 3. I live very close to the intersection
Sir, I do need a question though.
Okay, my question is, are you aware of just how dangerous this area is? Are you aware of the trucks, the vans, the utes and the wannabe Formula 1 drivers that actually come through this area at a rate of knots that you probably wouldn't understand unless you live there?
Yes, council is, and I think that's not only been articulated in the report, but also from the ward councillors, and we've certainly taken on board the comments from the community as well. Okay,
another question I have for you, is consideration ever going to be given to the roadway that's gazetted roadway on the other side of Newman College between Empire and Pearson?
If you're referring to Stevenson, I'll get Mr Littleton to respond to that one.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. As advised in attachment 4 of the report to Council, the status and responsibility of a link road within Stevenson Avenue Road Reserve rests with the state government. The city's discussions with the relevant state government agencies has indicated that they do not consider there is any medium to long-term need for this road at this stage.
Perhaps they should come and live there for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Stan Crombie. Thank you. What's your name and suburb, sir?
My name's Stan Crombie and I live in Innaloo in Geneff Street. I wanted to talk, the questions I have are about the development at 38 Geneff Street and 59 Herser Road. And I did send in a thing to council and it got a bit messed up in the end, but I'll go through the question.
Sure.
Have the water levels in this proposed development been checked? The water table?
Yeah, Mr. Roddich.
Through the Chair, thanks for the question, Mr. Crombie. Yes, the City of Stirling have considered, I guess, the impact on stormwater and groundwater. However, it is up to the applicant and it's on the onus of the applicant to make sure that their development is constructed in a way which takes into consideration the impact of groundwater. The Department of Environment and Water and Regulation provide contour maps of groundwater levels in the area, and we have provided this to the applicant, but it is up to the applicant owner to manage the groundwater or the interruption to groundwater as part of their construction.
Thank you for that. The next question I had was, has the nature of the soil in this proposed development been checked? And just to tell you what happens, if you dig a hole in Geneff Street, you go through a fairly solid area of sand and then you run into an area where the sand takes on the nature of water, it flows, and then the topsoil drops down.
Mr. Roddich.
Through the Chair, Mr. Crombie, I guess impacts, also, maybe engineering impacts from the development will be considered through the building permit process and the structural design of the development. At the moment, we're only considering the planning application, so that will be up to the applicant to make sure that his structural engineer certifies that the method of construction is suitable on that land.
Okay. The next question I had was about the laneway. There's a laneway to the south of that development. It's a services laneway. Now, in the agenda of the last meeting that we were sent, in agenda page 10, it says that the laneway is controlled by the City of Stirling. On page 18, it says that it's owned by the City of Stirling.
Sure. Mr. Roddich.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Crombie, the reserve to the south is a drainage reserve for the purpose of stormwater drainage and is owned by the City of Stirling. So it is a drainage reserve, but it is owned by the City of Stirling.
It was vested from the state?
Correct.
Okay. The last question has got to do with the basement. Why don't the setback rules apply to the basement when they're applied to the ground floor? So the ground floor comes down, the basement's wider. Why is it wider?
Mr. Roddich.
If it
Thanks, Mayor. The setbacks do apply to the basement, and the Responsible Authority report addresses those considerations. I guess, Mr. Crombie, it comes down to their design. Yes, the basement is larger than, shall we say, the ground floor above, and therefore the reduced setbacks to that boundary. I believe the basement's nil on the boundary at certain parts of the development, and these were considered in the assessment. So setbacks definitely apply to the basement where they're above ground.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Andre Dines, please. Thank you, Mr. Dines.
Good evening, Andre Dines, Burrows Road, Carrinup. Firstly, a quick thank you to the Mayor and all those councillors and staff who attended and facilitated the special meeting of electors. Also a thank you to all the concerned Carrinup residents who attended and asked their own questions. My three questions relate to item 13.1 of the special electors meeting. Question 1. Motion 2 sought to release the documentation, including the site management plan, relating to what was approved for the construction workers' parking arrangements as part of the development approval 150460. Despite this being a condition of the development approval, the site management plan remains a confidential document and being withheld from those most impacted by the development, being the nearby residents. In response to motion 2, the officer's comment confirms that the approved site management plan does not permit contractors to park on site. Contractor parking is to be provided off-site. Contractors are to be transported via a bus to and from the site. A temporary car park was approved for 3 Tassels Place in Alloo. Construction commenced in November 2018, and since then the surrounding residential streets, verges, parks, reserves and vacant lots have been clogged with construction workers' cars from 5:30 in the morning, 6 days a week. This has had a significant impact on residents living on and near these streets. Can the Mayor please explain why, after 2.5 years of residents raising concerns about the unsafe and disruptive construction worker parking situation, that the City have not managed to effectively enforce compliance with the existing approved site management plan?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Mr Roddish.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Dines, for the question. The City has been, I guess, managing parking in accordance with the site management plan over the...
Excuse me.
So over the last number of years, of course, we understand that construction worker parking has considerably become a larger issue around the site, and we are dealing directly with AMP at the moment. The site management plan is continually changing, given that we've had a number of approvals for the site. Most recently, myself and the other 2 directors met with the AMP, representatives from AMP, to discuss contractor parking, and at the moment we're looking at enforcing contractor parking on the AMP parking site, the shopping centre site, and also how we can look at managing parking restrictions in the area. So look, I understand the community concern with parking in the area. We haven't turned a blind eye to it. We're working through it.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to ask you to refrain from yelling out, please.
And we will continue to work through it. Thank you.
Mr Dines.
Thank you. Question 2. Recommendation number 2 of motion 2 states that the City investigates the preparation of a parking plan for the Karrinyup Regional Centre and surrounding walkable catchment once the current approved redevelopment of the site is complete. That is not considered soon enough. In fact, the current approved redevelopment may never eventuate. The current development approval 150460 included the proposed 8-storey residential building on Burrows Road, which is now subject to a current development application 1906 for a 15-storey building. Hence, they have no intent to build what was originally approved for this part of the site. Along with the recommendations in the motions for the special meeting of electors, we want all these matters addressed now. We have been dealing with this for nearly 2.5 years and could be facing another 10 to 25 years of construction if you take into account the proposed redevelopment of the North Court building, the library, the community hall and the car park sites. Can the Mayor please assign timeframes to each of these motions tonight to ensure that they are made a priority by the City staff and dealt with in a timely manner?
And thanks for that question, Mr Dines, and it's certainly up to Council to consider that item tonight and put timeframes on if they wish.
Thank you. Question 3. The officer's comment in motion 4 being the City advises that clause 5.5.1 of the local planning scheme number 3 would not preclude the City from recommending approval for the development application in the City's responsible authority report in the event that the City's assessment concludes the proposal warrants approval. Can the Mayor please clarify if the wording concludes or warrants has the same intent or meaning as using its discretion as referenced in clause 5.5.1 of the local planning scheme number 3? I believe clause 5.5.1 would not prevent the City from approving the current application if it complies with all the statutory planning framework. However, the clause would prevent the City from using its discretion to approve it if it does not fully comply with the statutory planning framework, including local planning scheme number 3.
Mr Rodich, could you please respond?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Dines, for the question. Clause 551 of the local planning scheme allows the city to approve a development application despite non-compliance with a standard or requirement prescribed under the scheme. Accordingly, the city can recommend or approve an application despite non-compliance with a relevant standard or requirement within the applicable planning framework. What you've discussed there in clause 5.51 relates to residential, development subject to the residential design codes, and the residential design codes are a performance-based document, and therefore discretion can definitely be used in consideration of anything under the R codes. But 551 refers to standards and requirements of the scheme, which are separate to the residential design codes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Dines. Robert Warman, please.
Mr Mayor, Councillors, I'm Robert Warman from University Avenue Churchlands, and my question has been answered in previous discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Alan Morse.
Thank you. Alan Morse, Francis Avenue, Karrinyup. My 3 questions relate to the Karrinyup Shopping Centre redevelopment, specifically the proposed East Village residential apartments. Question 1, the City of Stirling and the Metro Inner North JDAP required design changes to the cross-ventilation of about 70 of the 94 apartments in the now 7-storey building. It was originally a 4-storey building, before it could go ahead. Can you advise whether those required cross-ventilation design changes have yet been made because the apartments are now being sold?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, they have, Mr Morse.
Thank you. Question 2, no work still appears to be taking place on the site allocated. Have any dates yet been set for the commencement and, importantly, the completion of the East Village apartments?
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Morse. I think I've previously stated that we expected it to be early this year. We have a building permit in our processes at the moment. It is very close to being issued. By that, I mean most likely within the next week. Once you've got a building permit, I guess it's up to the builder to determine when he wants to start construction. In most instances, within submitting a building permit, you would start to see some construction within a minimum of 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And any time frame then on completion, or is that open-ended?
I guess the construction must be completed within 2 years of the building permit, and then they require to have an extension to that building permit. And in terms of the planning approval, that's valid once they substantially commenced, and there's no limitation to that.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Third question is, what parking arrangements will be in place for construction workers working on the East Village apartments? Shopping centre construction workers continue to clog the streets near the site, causing the streets to often be unsafe and traumatising the locals.
Thank you. Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. A site management plan was required as part of the development approval and prior to construction taking place on site. And a site management plan hasn't been approved as yet, but we're well aware that the site management plan must address construction workers to an acceptable level to the city, noting that the concerns raised by the community in regards to the rest of the construction on the site. So we'll definitely take that into consideration where construction workers will park as part of that site management plan, but we haven't approved the site management plan at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Simon Wheeler.
Good evening, Mayor Owen, councillors and staff. Simon Wheeler from Scarborough. Mayor Owen, the statutory time frame for, these are questions in relation to item 13.1. The statutory time frame for determination of DA 19-1906, I believe, is 90 days. The city's website notes that as of today, we are on day 447 of 90. Ignoring stop-the-clock time extensions, I assume we are still far in excess of 90 days, and in such case the applicant could determine, in line with the regulations, that the application has been deemed refused. My question is, what is stopping the applicant from proceeding to a DAP hearing on that basis?
I'm guessing you'd have to ask them, but Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Wheeler, for the question. I guess the only thing stopping the applicant is the applicant not requesting an extension of time. Once an applicant requests an extension of time, that 90 days is surpassed, and the city must deal with it within that period of that extension of time. Most recently, we had an extension of time to deal with the application by the 17th of May, and that's where the application is at the moment. In terms of the DAP hearing, I assume you mean the SAT hearing, because a deemed refusal must be taken up to the State Administrative Tribunal, not the Development Assessment Panel.
Okay. But then the SAT can refer straight back to the DAP. So, yeah. Question 2. Motion 5 of the motions put at the special electors meeting requests council authorise a councillor to make a deputation recommending refusal of DA 19-1906. If we have to wait for the responsible authority report and a further council meeting, and the applicant does by any method persuade the DAP or through the SAT to hear this application without an RAR, this will not allow enough time to bring this motion before council. I strongly believe that the presentation by Karrinyup Residents for Responsible Development at the special meeting of electors provides more than enough reason for this council to recommend, this is council, not the city, to recommend refusal of this application and to resolve tonight to make a deputation to the DAP on that basis. To my understanding, there's no legislative barrier to council implementing the intent of this motion today.
Sorry, we'll just wait and just check your microphone just on that last part. Right again from you, Mr Wheeler. No, we'll swap you over.
Did I break it? Sorry.
Sorry about that. If you just that last 3 or 4 words I missed.
There's nothing to stop the council from implementing this, from voting on this motion today. Can the city confirm that this is the case? And in such case, will council proceed to vote on this item tonight on that basis and not on the officer's recommendation?
Thank you for that question, Mr Wheeler. I might just get Rodich too, just to give us an update in terms of the date for the RAR to potentially come to council and what the likelihood, etc. are, if you could.
Thanks for the question, Mr Wheeler. As I stated just recently, this afternoon, the city were given an extension to submit the Responsible Authority report till the 17th of May by the presiding member of the Metro Inner North JDAP. Now, we anticipate that we will submit that RAR to council on the 11th of May. The application has been called in, and we'll make sure that that report is provided
the
to
question
council.
is, I'm sorry.
I understand. Yeah, I understand the question. So council can obviously make whatever determination they require tonight, but it is every intention that the RAR will come to council early in May, prior to that going to JDAP.
But there's nothing stopping the council from resolving tonight to make a deputation to the DAP.
No, council can make whatever decision they like tonight.
Thank you. Question 3. The additional information in answer to my question at the special meeting of electors notes in essence that the Karrinyup expansion did not require a structure plan because it was determined without one. It was determined without one because the proposals laid out in Mayor Italiano's letter to WAPC in 2014 to enable the creation of a structure plan were not implemented by council. Had they been so, we would not be in the state we are in now, relying on the wildly unsuitable Karrinyup Regional Centre guidelines to control a major locality-changing residential development. Some 7 years later, we remain in exactly the same place. The officer's recommendations to council are in the main welcome, but are peppered with terms such as at a future council committee meeting. My concern here is the quantum of the term future. Our immediate future, or we're talking another 7 years in the future? Will the council not resolve tonight to set a suitable and realistic time frame for all of these motions to be implemented to provide the transparency and accountability that Mayor Italiano's letter emphasised was required?
Thank you. Mr Rodich, are you able to provide some comment around that?
Through the chair, the motions I put up tonight, it's for council to consider whether or not they want to put I guess, a time for those reports to be provided to a future Plan Development Committee. These are comprehensive documents and policy which we need to look at, and the city understands the urgency of the community for these documents to be provided and understands the views of elected members on this. However, it's difficult to give an exact time or date without going through that process. We've got to make sure that we carry out these planning changes in response to changes in planning regulations, but also to make sure that we are doing the right thing for the local community and I guess the future planning for that location. So these things do take some time, and that's why the officer's recommendation states that there isn't a defined time when we can bring these policies back to council, but we understand the urgency, and we will provide these as soon as possible.
And I hope council will note that in their discussions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Lundy.
Judy Lundy, Karrinyup. My three questions relate to the transport plan prepared by Oricon as part of the current development application for the mixed-use expansion of the Karrinyup Shopping Centre, and in particular Strategy 5 of that transport plan, which says, Strategy 5, introduce paid parking for staff. Introduce paid parking for all staff to assist in managing travel demand and behaviour at the centre, and future-proof the car park design to allow for paid customer parking to be introduced. Can the city please confirm, 1, if the city's library and community hall car park will be subject to paid parking?
No.
Okay, thank you. 2, what measures are in place to ensure ratepayers can access this car park? So this is the city's library and community hall car park. What measures are in place to ensure ratepayers can access this car park to use the library and community hall as a priority over shoppers?
There aren't any at the moment.
Okay, so there might be something for further questioning and further...
Been discussed.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your sneaky little 3 questions in one here, but keep going.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
that's been resolved in another way. These are my 3 questions, and I'm on my 3rd now of my 3 questions. How long is the lease/licence to the Karrinyup Shopping Centre for the use of this car park, and what are the key terms of the arrangement?
They haven't got a lease, but I'll just get Mr. Rodich. Is that a reciprocal arrangement, I'm assuming, of some sort?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Lundy, for the question. The city has not entered into any lease over any of the car parking space on the city's land at 13 Davenport Street within the Karrinyup Shopping Centre.
Thank you.
And I understand what you're asking there. Look, we did discuss it a lot after the special electors meeting in terms of they're very different uses, and whilst they quite often do complement and people go between them, trying to work out a way to ensure that people who do access the library and the community centre there have the ability to park. So we have been starting to consider how that might happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kieran Kelly, please.
Kieran Kelly, Scarborough. Just to start with, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank the council for their online viewing, as it's no reflection to my nightlife, but I have found myself actually watching it a number of times over the last few months. So thank you very much for that. In the council's submission to the DAP regarding the 4-storey apartment building on the Yellow site in West Coast Highway, your submission highlighted that the city was against the proposal due to the outstanding parking and traffic issues, and more importantly, the bulk and scale being out of context with its surrounding residential area. Why is it that this council and its officers failed to submit similar objections to the Sentinel project on Manning Road in Scarborough, a development that was twice the height of the planning scheme, twice the height of the planning scheme, and one that Development WA, which is now approved, had a 90% against submissions for that particular building. And will the council and its officers use the same language to reject the AMP proposal at the Karrinyup Shopping Centre?
Thank you. I'll get Mr. Rodich to make comment on the Sentinel development first.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question. I guess the key difference between the yellow site and the Sentinel development is that the City of Stirling are the planning authority for the yellow site. We are not the planning authority for the development at 194 West Coast Highway. This is Development WA, and they carry out the planning assessment. So the City do not carry out a planning assessment or write a report as we did for the yellow site. I guess that's the key difference there. In terms of the Karrinyup site, we're still going through the assessment of that, Mr Kelly, and we will address all those planning matters or applicable to the site in the City's responsible authority report. There's a key difference between yellow and the Centennial site.
I understand that, but I thought the council would
Thanks,
actually
Mr. Kelly.
support people in the Scarborough area.
Yeah, Mr Kelly, as you're aware, I can also add that council, prior to that, have written to all levels of government, including the local members, the candidates for the election and the Premier and the Planning Minister, asking them, well, letting them know council's view on sticking to the planning framework.
Yeah, with the corrupted planning commission anyhow. But can the council, then my second question, can the council give me an update on the promised traffic management scheme for the Scarborough area, a promised document that is about 2 years old?
Mr Littleton?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the question, Mr Kelly. The Transport Working Group continues to meet to look at the various countermeasures that need to be applied in the Scarborough area. As you would be aware, it's a complex issue. We have looked at some concept designs that Main Roads have developed and some associated traffic modelling, but we're currently not in a position to clarify or confirm an outcome at this point in time. The Transport Working Group continues to meet, however, and as information becomes available, we'll be certain to ensure that it's well communicated to the community.
Thank you, because I think the biggest problem is that when these developments are being approved, that they look at a single building in one and don't look at the whole area. Now, we have a map from WA that shows 15 buildings to be built oversized.
And you have the agreement of council on that. Darren Williams.
Good evening all. Darren from Churchlands Green regarding Churchlands Green management. Has any analysis been done around when the Newman primary schools combine around traffic around University Avenue?
Ms Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, we are aware of the proposal to combine the school campuses. We will review the traffic-related issues when we get further details on that proposal, though. So we're certainly aware of it. We understand that that will have some impact, but once we become, once the proposal is further established, we'll certainly review and consider those impacts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Louisa Jill Fowler.
Good evening, Council. As you heard...
Sorry, I just need your name and suburb to start.
Louisa Jill Fowler, I live at Karrinyup.
Thank you.
It's in conjunction with the development at Karrinyup Shopping Centre. I've been a long-term resident and almost been run over several times by the inept arrangements for workmen on site. My actual questions relate to the decommissioning of the petrol station currently on Burrows, Karrinyup. In the past, it has been that there's nothing built on the site for several years due to environmental contamination concerns. Now, at the last meeting, a gentleman brought up the question of the tavern being built on said site. It's also been brought up, despite this latest plan that was given in August last year, that this the tavern is going to be built on the site.
No, sorry, I'll get some clarification. I don't believe that's so, but Mr Rodich, if you can give some clarification.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Ms Fowler, the tavern's not being built on the BP site. That's
Well, that was the indication given at last,
Not from us, Ms Fowler.
well, whether it's...
I'm sorry, we can't debate it tonight. I'm happy to organise a meeting with the officers to go through it, but it's not the case.
Well, the question is, the petrol station site, who's going to build on it? Because it's supposed to be done within the next year or so, and in previous years, decommissioned sites have had to be left vacant for environmental reasons.
So let's get Mr Rodich to answer. So if the BP site moves and the site is vacant, what's the requirement and how long can something be built on there?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Ms Fowler. The owner would have to satisfy the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation requirements in terms of decommissioning of that petrol station site. I can't give you a specific time for that remediation, but of course that's a consideration for the developer should they get approval to develop on that corner of the property.
There is a second part of that. It's regarding the new petrol station site. I gather from the meeting last time that the new petrol station is going to be up near the fast food areas. Given the fact within the next 10 years electric cars will be much to the fore, what provisions are going to be made for the electric car development for the next 10 years, given the previous petrol stations been in the site for over 50 years?
Thank you. Mr Rodich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Ms Fowler, the City will consider any application put forward for that site. If there is a petrol station put forward, we will consider the makeup of that proposal. Whether or not it includes electric car charging stations, I can't tell you. It's probably unlikely at the current moment, but look, I can't see what the future holds and when we receive an application for that site.
Well, it seems tonight that you've obfuscated on all the concerns.
Ms Fowler, I'm sorry, we're going to take questions tonight. Well, I'm happy to organise a meeting for you, though, if you'd like to discuss this further. Vaughan Sutherland, please.
Vaughan Sutherland from Carrinup. Look, my question has been part answered or brought up by others earlier, but basically this applies to a question that I asked at the special electors meeting. So I just wondered, following from that question being asked, what is being done to negate the issues I raised at the last meeting regarding parking on both sides of the street in Somerton Road and Davenport Street and Ellsworthy Roads, significantly clogging and, as pointed out before, is dangerous. I witnessed someone nearly run over again yesterday morning.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I can tell you, I know Mr Rodich provided some of the information earlier. All the directors have been out not only on site, I can assure you they've been in the streets over the last month, already talking to builders and ensuring some of those blocks or problem blocks are cleared. The parking services are also looking at the possibility of putting the yellow line marking down certain sides of streets and whether parking can be restricted, and negotiating with AMP that tradesmen are expected now, a proportion of them now that there's parking available, can park on the shops to alleviate it. So we are working through, and hopefully we'll have some more firm news for you in the very near future.
Okay, relating to that question again, has the council approached AMP and asked them as a good corporate citizen if they could demand of Multiplex that all of the tradesmen are to be accommodated at the parking on the AMP site? If you drive upstairs at any time during the day, you could shoot a cannon through there and not hit a Hilux. Why not move them up there?
The short answer is yes. Mr Rodich, do you want to provide a little bit of information?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Sullivan. Yes, AMP have written to the City recently following a meeting with myself and the other directors 2 weeks ago. They are happy to provide parking on site, in particular the upper deck on the eastern side. I guess the issue which we need to consider is human behaviour, and without I guess, restrictions on the street, enforcement action, how do the city and AMP make those workers park within those bays? But we're working towards that. They've made a commitment to make those bays available. As we know, driving around the shopping centre, there are a number of bays available during the day, which would I guess, allow for most of those workers to park on the site. So we're definitely working with AMP on there. And I guess we just got to work through the details to make sure that the workers do park there, and how do we make them park there. The space is available, and we're at that point at the moment.
Okay. My last and third question. What is being done by the council to negate in future the obvious deceitful behaviour of developers characterised by the Karrinyup development?
Well, you'd probably have to ask the developers on that one, Mr Sutherland. Lee Saunders. Thank you. Robert Mitchell.
Good evening, Mayor. Robert Mitchell, Karrinyup.
Mr Mitchell.
Councillors and council officers and public. With the shopping centre development, like many others, I have, like other ratepayers and concerned people, raised issues. I asked to see a Section 40 certificate issued for the proposed Hoyts Theatres Complex Special Facility Licence. It's a public document, and I was refused by the council administration. No matter, I inquired at the Department of Racing, Gaming and Liquor as to what conditions were put by the City of Stirling. No conditions. Confirmed later by the City of Stirling, eventually. Yeah. No conditions. Yeah, now, there's going to be 5 liquor licence applications there. One, Archie Brothers, Australia, is a special facility licence for entertainment. I found out about that in the Coastal Times at Mandurah, and I believe it was put in the Perth Now. Wasn't in the City of Stirling's. Are you aware of it?
I'm not personally aware of it.
Oh, okay. Is anybody aware of it? No. Yeah. Yeah, that's Archie Brothers. Then there's the Hoyts Cinema Special Facility. Then there's the Camfield application for a tavern licence. And then there's a liquor store application by Aldi. And there's a liquor store licence by Liquorland. BWS liquor store is existing there. There will be more, I imagine, restaurants and small bars, etc. Can you provide me, written in the answer, the precise conditions of application 1, which is on that, which is the Archie Brothers, Section 40 certificate under the Liquor Control Act?
Yes, we're happy to provide you that in writing, Mr Mitchell.
Now, with this application, with a bowling alley, dodgem cars circuit, karaoke rooms, holy moly circuit area licensed for alcohol consumption, being areas where unaccompanied juveniles can frequent, and a licensed bar and area where unaccompanied juveniles can go. Can you provide a written into the answer the precise conditions on application 3, which is the tavern licence from Camfield?
Yes, Mr Mitchell. Yes, yes we can.
Okay.
Yep.
Where was I now? The unique layout of these are within the close proximity to all the proposed residential units. That is the south-west corner. Right. Buyers will just flock to buy these proposed tranquil units, then have to listen to all the drunks and fighting, etc., all hours. During the operating hours, which in some of these will be from 9 a.m. in the morning until 3 a.m. the next day, tenants will complain to the council and to the media, etc. Then that is an inheritance of these on-the-run planning decisions. The tranquil suburb of Karrinyup will inherit a reputation. Scarborough revisited. Like Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street, greed is good. Is the council near sending their report to the planning final authority and they don't need to know this? Or are you to include these proposals and the height and positions as not wanted by the council? Certainly the ratepayers and electors don't want the high rise. I doubt whether potential tenants of the apartments will not want the potential of those licensed premises. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mitchell.
Take that on board.
And quite simply, the people who purchase those apartments will have to make that decision. Mr Mitchell, that was one of your best yet. Arnold Davies.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, staff and members of the gallery. Will the City of Stirling councillors amend Regulation 610 of the Parking Local Law 2014 to require the alleged offenders to provide evidence they had permission to stop or park on a street verge instead of the resident being required to attend court in the case of the matter reaching that level? Currently, there's a considerable amount of infill building going on in the Karrinyup area. In a case near my area, an elderly woman who has a chronic heart condition is having to put up with workers parking all over her verge, about 3 a day, because there's houses being built nearby. She's too afraid to make a complaint because she doesn't want to have to attend court. And this has happened a hell of a lot since the building has been going on at the Karrinyup Shopping Centre.
Let me get you an answer from Mr Quirk on that one, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, there's no plans to review the parking local law at this stage. Having said that, any illegal parking on a verge parking does require the consent of the adjoining landowner. Our rangers and security, and more so our parking officers, have been infringing vehicles that do contravene the local law around the Karrinyup Shopping Centre. There's no requirement. It's very rare that such cases are challenged to a point where they do end up in front of a magistrate. So there would be no need for a resident to attend court to ensure that infringement is pursued. That would be the city's obligation to make sure that that infringement does hold up in front of the magistrate. But the key challenge we have in Karrinyup at the moment is, aside from the site management plan and the construction management plan considerations that we're working with AMP on at the moment, legal parking on street is definitely affecting the amenity for our residents, and we understand that, but it's not illegal. And that's the enforcement challenge that we currently have. Parking on a verge without consent of the adjoining landowner is contrary to the local law.
I've asked the question, will the councillors consider it, not the administration?
No, I get what you're asking, Mr Davies, but I think the main point there is that the resident doesn't have to attend court.
They're required to fill in a form to say they will be prepared to attend court.
Okay, but it would be a very unusual circumstance, Mr Davies.
The second question, will the City of Stirling councillors require the Carrinup Shopping Centre to remove the fence which prevents the ratepayers from having use of the western footpath of Francis Avenue between Davenport Street and the new roundabout? It's been fenced off since the 19th of December 2018.
Mr Littleton, are you aware of that?
Look, we didn't need to take that on notice, Mr Davies, and give you a response.
We'll check up that one for you, Mr Davies.
What action has the City of Stirling taken to have the public telephone box, which was in Francis Avenue, just south of Davenport Street, reinstalled? It was about the only public telephone box in Carrinup.
Yeah, Mr Littleton?
Look, again, we'll have a look at that, but what we're very well aware of is that that these facilities are being removed from local streets. So it's a user-based system, and with the advent of mobile phones, not too many people are using telephone boxes anymore.
Under the sale of Telstra agreement, there was a requirement for Telstra to keep the public telephone boxes.
Yeah, we'll check it out for you, Mr Davies, and see what we can find out for you.
Thank you.
Lynn Nowak? Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and, dare I say it, electors. I've only presented one question, but with your indulgence, I'd like to ask two, one without notice.
You certainly may.
Thank you. The first question, can the Mayor please ask all of the councillors gathered tonight to actually indicate to us, with a show of hands, how many of them actually read the 4 detailed papers that accompanied the KRRD presentation, along with the community survey results, as we presented on the 24th of February?
Thank you for that question, Mrs Nowak, and no, I can't ask them to raise their hand this evening, but I'm certainly happy to ask them to send you an email with their response.
Love that. I love people who do their homework.
That's it.
Second question.
My first thought was there only 4?
Year 12s who don't do homework with me do after-school lessons, just letting you know. If I may, could I ask a few people to stand?
Well,
Ladies?
this is quick, Mrs Nowak.
This is going to be really quick.
Okay.
Because it's become an issue. Carrinup, as you know, consists of many very mature people. I'm going to put myself in that category at the moment. This week we had a very dangerous situation at the roundabout of Francis and Davenport. A truck who was going in excess of 50 nearly cleaned up a car of one of these ladies. She was frightened. She was barely missed. I don't believe the truck driver really could have given a damn. Does the council really appreciate, are they aware of how dangerous Davenport, Burrows and Francis Street really are? That's an issue.
Thank you for that. And look, certainly there's several issues there. We are certainly aware that it's not a safe environment at the moment with the amount of traffic and everything that's around that.
If I may add to it, however,
yes.
On Burrows Road, it has been narrowed considerably in the last 2 weeks. It is dangerous, it is uneven. There are 4 levels on Burrows Road when you try to cross Burrows Road. It is very easy to fall. There are no signs indicating uneven levels. I was under the belief that there should be. Certainly there are signs saying there are alternative pathways to take, but when you have to cross the road to go to the gym and you fall over at 5 o'clock in the morning and skin your knees, it's highly traumatic. And I do believe I'll be seeking counselling over it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Knight. Samara Kemp. We're almost there.
Good evening. Samara Kemp, Carrinup. 2 questions from me. During the presentation by the KRRD, they identified a plan available on the Carron Up Shopping Centre website dated 2018, showing 2 new buildings in the northwest corner of the site, including where the Northcote building is currently located. Has the city subsequently sought clarification as to what is proposed for those buildings, so the use, the height, etc.?
Our questions have been answered with nothing at this stage. Mr. Rodich?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Kemp, for your question. No, we're not aware of any proposition for the North Court building at this moment from the applicant. We have, of course, asked them throughout, questions over the last 6 months through public question time, but there's no plans for that site at the moment.
But the drawings indicate otherwise.
There has been no plans submitted to the council, and our questions have been answered where there is no plans for that site.
Fair enough. Is it understood that AMP have sought yet another extension or a stop the clock on the assessment of the current development application 19/1906 for the proposed 9, 15 and 24-storey high-rise buildings in order to respond to the city's latest request for information? Can the Mayor please provide the Carron residents and ratepayers a summary of what the latest information is being sought by the city?
Sure. Mr. Rodich, are you able to provide that now?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Ms. Kemp. Yes, as you heard before, they have sought an extension that was granted by the presiding member this afternoon. That's to the 17th of May. The information we requested, I guess at a high level, most recently was in respect to building height, plot ratio, car parking, universal design, communal open space, from memory.
Thank you.
Lots.
That's good.
Kelvin Traynor? Yes.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, Kelvin works as a carer and he had to go to work.
Sure. Sorry, if you can just raise that microphone for a sec.
Sorry. He asked me to ask 3 questions. The first one is, and we're talking here about Jeanette Street and we're talking about Hertha Road in Innaloo. He's a bit concerned about that there's an increase in traffic in the mornings and in the afternoon, and also an increase in curbside parking in the mornings and the afternoon in an area where the streets aren't really that wide, and the rubbish trucks and the fire brigade or the ambulance. So he's asked the question, how will that be addressed?
Thank you. Mr. Rodich?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Crombie, for the question. Through the planning assessment, the city assessed car parking for the development, and the development is required to provide a number of parking bays for what is proposed for this 28 multiple dwelling development. The parking provided meets with the city's requirements in terms of parking on the street in the future. Like we've said tonight, we have to monitor that, and that will depend as development is constructed in that locality if it causes a parking concern. But in terms of the development you're talking about tonight, the application meets with the parking requirements specified under our local development plan for that area.
That's right, but added on to that is parking by people who go to...
Thank you, sir. Just need questions, though.
Oh, sorry. Well, yep. He was talking about people who park and go to the station as well as that mix, and it's an issue for us. The third question he asked, it's one about social concerns in relation to people who do shift work. And he's a little bit concerned about the fact that there will be single units in there for younger people.
Yep. Mr. Rodich?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Mr. Crombie, for the question. I guess, the form of accommodation provided by this development may allow for shift workers, but I guess that's a reality for life, that people don't work normal 9 to 5 jobs. If they are shift workers, well, they shouldn't be precluded from living in a development. I assume the question may be about noise at night, but there are considerations under environmental protection noise regulations which we can deal with, but that wouldn't be about people coming and going to their apartment.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, that's all I have on my list. Have I missed anyone? There is one more? Yes, sorry, I don't have your name, so I'll just have to ask you to come forward. Apologies, just your name and suburb.
My name is Annette Wallman and I live in Churchlands. My question, the estate is designed for family living with parks, local traffic-only roads. Young families and grandparents make up a good deal of our community, and the parks are well used, resulting in a fair bit of foot traffic in and around the parks. In addition, dozens of school children cross the road twice each weekday. A number of dogs have been killed or hit by traffic rounding the bend in University Avenue, right near where the children cross. And they, to me, are the canary in the gold mine. The gold mine? The coal mine. My question's about evaluation. What weighting will safety measures be given in the evaluation of the traffic trials in comparison to any perceived inconvenience?
Sure. Mr. Littleton?
Look, I'd open by saying road safety is critical. Look, road safety impacts are always considered as a significant component to any assessment undertaken by the city. That being said, the most recent traffic surveys showed that the speed of vehicles on all roads within the subdivision are below the 50 km/h speed limit and are generally around 40 km/h. Also, the most recent crash statistics available to the city do not show any reported crashes in the last 5 years along Alumni Terrace, University Avenue, Parrot Bush Road, Mountain Bell Road, Campus Way, Applebury Street and Lacebark Road. The data available shows that the roads within the subdivision currently exhibit a very good road safety record. We'll certainly continue to review that as an outcome of Council's consideration of the item before Council.
My question though is, what is the relative weighting in your evaluation of inconvenience versus safety? There are so many little children running around.
Thank you. And I think, as Mr. Littleton has said, safety is certainly a critical priority. That is all I have. So thank you for your patience, everyone. We'll now move on to item 8, which is applications for leave of absence. Councillor Caddy, I believe you have an amendment.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. The previous leave of absence that was endorsed by Council 2 weeks ago was incorrect. Can I please change that to the 26th of April to the 10th of May?
Thank you. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to take a leave of absence from the 2nd of April to the 9th of April, please.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? If not, I will add mine in, and I would like to add in a leave from the 2nd of April to the 13th of April inclusive, please. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for the leaves of absence? Move Councillor Lagan, seconder Councillor Boothman, if we can vote on that. We're just missing Councillor Migdale. It's unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I have a mover and a seconder for the council minutes of the 16th of March 2021? Move Councillor Spagnolo, seconder Councillor Hatton. And go to the vote, please, councillors. We've just got a couple more. We've got Councillor Proud to go online. Thank you. And that motion is carried 14-1 with Councillor Farrelly voting against, sorry. Announcements by the presiding member. I do have one. Just a really quick one. Miss Pickering, up the back. Would you stand up, please? You didn't tell me this earlier today. If we could all wish Mayor Earl Pickering a happy birthday, please. Yes. Keeping secrets from the Mayor. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, we'll now move to the Committee and Resource Committee items. Any alternative motions that were submitted have been included in your running sheet. Item 12.1 ES1 is required to be pulled out as it was subject of a petition. Item 12.1 F3 is required to be pulled out as it needs an absolute majority vote and it was referred to Council at the committee meeting. Are there any other items? There are. I'll start Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to pull out item 12.1 PS2.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent, I saw your hand.
12.1 CC2.
Thank you. Is there any other indications? Councillor Ree. No? Great. Right, let's get on with these and we'll start with 12.1 ES1, request to modify speed limit on Delaunay Street, Balcatta, a subject of petition. Councillor Sargent as chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The committee's recommendation was to procedural this to the next Community and Resource meeting on the 4th of May, so I so move that.
Okay, seconded Councillor Perkoff. We'll go to the vote. It's a procedural motion to hold it over. Councillor Migdal, just need you down there for a vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We'll now go to item 12.1 CC2, which is the Community Arts and Events Fund Policy Review. Page 72, Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am happy to move the recommendation from committee, but with your indulgence, Mr Mayor, number 1, can it be made attachment number 2? And I can explain that a little bit if councillors wish.
Sure, you can do that. Yep.
I'm glad Councillor Perkoff said he needs it because this is...
All right, let's get a seconder and then you can just give it a quick...
because of him.
Second to Councillor Caddy. There you go. Yeah, second to Councillor Caddy. Just a quick explanation of why.
At committee, Mr Mayor, there was a bit of talk around the method and the procedures around how council is going to move forward on the events. And on the memo that we received on Friday had the questions and answers, and Councillor Perkoff did ask how do they get picked and what's the process involved there. So to put into the actual policy, just really hardening it up a bit and actually making that policy really fine-tuned to a point that we can work with.
Thank you. And is anyone opposed to this? Councillor Ree? So we'll go... Councillor Sargent, would you like to open or are you happy with that?
I'll close, Mr Mayor. I'm pretty happy with how everything's sorted.
Thanks. Councillor Caddy, you seconded.
Yeah, look, just briefly, there was a lot of debate about this at committee. I think the attachment 2 does outline what are the criteria for signature events in a lot more detail, which is great, and it's good to have those in the policy. So I think that that tidies things up, and really just to acknowledge that regardless of whether they're signature events or not, they still have to come back to the city for approval and for assessment every year. So look, I think the policy is a good one, and I think we should be supporting it this year. We always have the opportunity, as we always do, to review things as time goes on, and so if we're finding this is not working well for us, we can certainly review it again next year.
Thank you. Councillor Ree?
Thank you. Whilst I might support it as it is, because I do believe that we do need the funding policy, we do need to streamline it. But as I said in committee, I do not think this goes far enough. There are a lot of organisations that, like the Wembley Downs District Fair, that have gone on for a long time. And even though sometimes part of the amendment that addresses that issue, it doesn't address the fact that it's not there for 5 minutes. The markets have been going, that's a commercial entity. The Inglewood and Scarborough are more of a commercial entity. It's not so much as a community. And yes, whether you're old or young, you can attend. and that is true. However, some of these other events that have been going for a long time should actually be recognised. If we're going to call it signature events, if we're going to showcase it as proper community arts events, then that is not so much a community art event. The Inglewood, I'm sure lots of people come with that don't belong in Inglewood. Lots of people come to Scarborough that don't belong there. More people come to the Osborne Park show that live around the area and are contributing their dogs, cats, paintings, whatever. It brings the community together. Whilst this is addressing parts of it, it doesn't go far enough. So I don't believe, as I said the other night, that it addresses all the community things that we want to showcase. We're supposed to be making the policy streamlined. We're supposed to be making it overarching across the city. This is still not, in my opinion, addressing all the concerns that we have to upgrade it to the level of satisfaction for all the community to showcase what we actually have and what we've actually had for decades in our neighbourhood.
Thanks, Councillor Reid. Councillor Sandri?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do apologise I was not at committee. I don't sit on that committee. But what is attachment 2? We have a memo that has attachments, but there's no attachment 2 on the agenda.
It's a white paper that you received. It's just clarification on the.
I understand, but how is the public meant to follow attachment 2 in the recommendation when it doesn't form part of the agenda?
Well, we're sure that it forms part of the minutes.
Mr Mayor, yeah, exactly. That will form part of the minutes.
All right, and just for clarification, Inglewood, I can't speak on behalf of Scarborough, is not a commercial entity. It's a non-for-profit organisation, effectively, that any money that is raised goes back into Inglewood, hence why we have parklets, etc. in Inglewood, which are funded by the Inglewood on Beaufort and takes the pressure off the City of Stirling. So any money that's put into Inglewood on Beaufort comes back to our residents. And I also don't believe that the Osborne Park show was primarily surrounding residents. I do know, in fact, people come from all around metropolitan Perth to attend the Osborne Park show. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you indicating? Yes, Councillor Farrelly.
Look, I'd like to also, in a way, concur with Councillor Ree in the fact that we have a lot of long-term events run by things like the Scout groups, the other groups that are around in the district that have been run very effectively. They are not run by any combination of presenters or what do you call it, marketing people who do some fantastic events, because I come from Scarborough, and they do present the markets very well, and they do it very well indeed. But we really need to try and engender the neighbourhood within what we have within each of the areas that we live. And part of that is these events that have long-term traditional connections with everyone that lives nearby. Now, this particular policy, I would have to say, yes, I'm glad we're getting some policy with the clarity to it, but I think we need to start looking at what is it we really want to engender in those neighbourhoods, those interconnections, and are we in some way giving people a priority that will then potentially lead to the demise of other long-term events. So that is, I think it's a critical question that we have to raise with this policy, by the fact that they're prioritising events that are run by town teams which do get funding from the city, and the town teams do then extend it to people to run it extremely well, because look, we don't have the expertise, they don't always have the expertise either, and I think that does engender a well-run set of things like the markets, the Christmas carols at Scarborough, fantastic events, and really bring the community in. And also are great for the surrounding areas. But I don't want to see the loss of things such as the Wembley Downs affair. That's been very long term ever since I've been in Scarborough. It's been very much part of the fabric of that area, and it extends right through. So if we could have some sort of clarity to how the additional funding will be available, how we can have an ease for those events, long-term events, to access that funding, so they don't have to go through the ropes of a very much just a one-off funding event, and that will give them an opportunity to prepare for the next year. And as you know, when you're running those committees, you're not paid, and you start very early on to do it. So I'd like to see that as an additional thing to this policy. I will support it, but I want to see that in the behind the scenes. Thanks.
Thanks, and I understand what you're asking there, and we can ensure that the council receive a bit more of the framework that's around the selection process, but there's certainly no intent of this policy to disadvantage groups or to not fund those groups that do events all the time. Is anyone else who would like to speak? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sargent to close.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be quick. Nothing changes. All the events that take place in the City of Stirling, either being city supported or city run or community run, are going to carry on after today. What we're talking about here is how the city will help these events get by. Is that through money? Is that through in kind with rubbish? That's what we're talking about here. A lot of the events that take place in the City of Stirling are community run, and it's up to the community that do run these events every year to approach the City of Stirling and go, look, you've been supporting us every year, can we get that support again? The way the City of Stirling sets up its events these days has been streamlined. If you filled out an event application last year, that same event application can be used this year. You just got to fill in the changes that possibly are made. It's all very much streamlined. So they will have to always fill out an event application no matter what the community group is in the City of Stirling. So my opinion on this, my view on this, my belief on this is nothing changes from this point on. All we've done is hardened up the policy to allow a more rigorous view from the officers towards events and to perhaps help them along the way to be more sustainable. I'll finish with that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sargent, and I will put that motion. Move Councillor Sargent, seconded Councillor Caddy. If you could vote, please. And we're just waiting. Ferrante, Migdal, I think. Thank you, councillors, and that motion is carried with Councillor Ree opposed. Now go on to item 12.1 PS2, the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, Corporate 2020-2030. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a committee's recommendation of 2 items on page 92. There is a motion on the white paper from Councillor Thornton. I'm happy to move that too with your view, because I don't see it changing anything, but it's up to you, Mr Mayor. Happy for an amendment if you want to go down that path.
No, I'm happy for that to be the recommendation if you'd like, and happy, Councillor Thornton, to second that. It's your amendment, yep. So we'll just go straight to that as a motion. Is there anyone opposed? Yep, Councillor Lagan. Councillor Sargent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sustainable energy for the City of Stirling. We do a lot of talk on this, particularly these days, on trying to be as sustainable as possible. What we have in front of us here is to align the City of Stirling with the Paris Agreement, if you will, that tries to put our corporate City of Stirling into a carbon neutral environment in the years ahead. One of the reasons I agree with number 3 up on the board there is we have in this plan quite ambitious targets, and to achieve those ambitious targets, I think it's important that council keeps being on top of this and keeps getting updated with what's going forward and the city's attempt on trying to become as carbon neutral as possible. So I do support the extra motion number 3 up there, which actually does bring it back to council and it gives us an eye view on what's going on. So I'll leave it at that and I'll close, Mr Mayor.
Thanks. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. We can't manage what we can't measure. And at the heart of the Paris Climate Agreement is the fact that every 5 years, parties to the agreement have to submit their data. And it would make sense that we also have a critical framework that enables us to also measure our data and embed it into this plan. It's not really changing the intent of this plan, it's more just strengthening the SEEP by adding this critical review framework in it.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm not opposed to the intent of the policy, and in fact, so much so that I've moved a notice of motion that looks at provision of electric vehicles on tonight's agenda. What I would make mention of is that I would foreshadow the original two recommendations. I do oppose the alternative recommendation, and I understand the intent, but there are some issues for ratepayers in point 3 of the alternative recommendation. It talks about establishing a mechanism. What mechanism? Why would we establish a mechanism that might be diametrically opposed to what the federal government is already doing? We have a policy that is underlining a number of things that we intend to do. If that mechanism is different, then I'd want to know how it's going to be different and what the costs are to ratepayers, especially if there's a review every 5 years. I'm also concerned that point 3 states that undertake a critical review and also talks about the period 2025 to 2035, when in point 1 the council endorses a sustainable energy action corporate plan policy 2020 to 2030. So they're differing dates. I think I'm happy with the original recommendation, or to hold this over so that we can get more information and tidy up the intent of both the dates but also the mechanism. And I would like some costing if we're going to vote on this, because I believe that the ratepayers are already paying tax at a federal level for action on climate change, and will be, if we don't have a good mechanism control, we'll be paying extra rates for items that we may or may not include in any critical review. I think I've spoken previously about the action plan that the City of Sydney has undertaken, which is a $60 million partnership with a solar provider. You know, that might sound outrageous, but I actually agree with the intent, and I'd like our policy to go down that pathway. I don't think this clarifies it enough as yet.
Yep. So with yours, if you'd like to, with that, foreshadow the 1 and 2, I'm happy to take that as a foreshadow for the original committee recommendation, and then if someone else chooses a procedural, it'll come back. Yeah. Yeah, or we can put them separate. Let's see where it goes anyway. I think it's been asked. Councillor Migdale was next.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to move a procedural, please.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for a procedural? Councillor Perkoff. So that's a procedural to hold it over to next, to a committee or council? Committee. Just next committee?
Committee.
To the next committee? To provide that information. So we'll
provide further information.
Yeah, to provide information on item 3.
Thanks.
So I will put that as procedural motion to hold that over. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Brings us to item 12.1 F3, which is statutory budget review. Absolute majority is required. Go to you, Councillor Sargent, as chair of the committee. Page 321.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just finding it. This was held over at committee, Mr Mayor, to this committee, to this council. I will move the officer's recommendation. I believe that's on page 322 of the agenda.
You, Councillor Caddy, has seconded that. Is there anyone opposed to this? If not, I will put that. All those in favour? Thank you. We've just got a few to go. Councillor Farrelly and Ferrante, I think it is. Yes. Thank you. And that motion is carried with Councillor Ree against. Thank you. That brings us to the balance of reports. Councillor Sargent, as chair of the committee, would you like to move the balance of reports, please?
It's me great joy, Mr Mayor, to move the balance of reports.
Councillor Proud has seconded that. I will put the balance of reports. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Members of the gallery, please be advised the remainder of the committee and committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution. For those members of the gallery who are, obviously we had a bit of interest tonight on the Churchlands item. The committee, because it's been moved as balance of reports, the committee recommendation stands, so that that trial goes ahead. Councillors will now move on to the direct to council items. Item 13, reports for consideration in accordance with section 4.24 of the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2009. We'll start with item 13.1, which is the special meeting of electors 2021 on page 395. Councillor Boothman and Councillor Migdal have left the room. Do I have a mover of a motion? Councillor Caddy would like to move a motion.
Thank you. I have an alternative, which hopefully, sorry, the girls have received some last minute changes that are just working through. Thank you. Just
go through them.
So it's as per the officer's recommendation with the changes in red. So the changes to 1, that the city undertakes a review of the planning consultation procedure with a view to developing a planning consultation local planning policy. 3 has been reworded that the city prepares a parking plan for the Karrinyup Regional Centre and surroundable walkable catchment as soon as possible to be completed before the end of this year. And 10, that the city establishes a community reference group to assist in the development of any planning instruments that result from Resolution 8 and 9. And the reasons for those changes, sorry ladies, yeah. So the reason for the change to 1, which is the planning policy, is that a planning consultation local planning policy is required to allow council to vary certain requirements of the planning and development regulation, particularly in relation to the scope, how far we advertise and how long the advertising timeframes are for. So that's why we need to develop the policy to allow us to vary those things. The establishment of a community reference group was requested by the electors and will assist the city to develop future planning instruments for the Karrinyup Regional Centre. And the other change was to reflect the community's requests that the parking plan be expedited and developed as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. And a seconder for this motion? Okay. Would you like to second?
Thank you. I'd just like to get back to that point 3, and it says to the end of the year. I have listened to the community tonight, and also since I've been talking.
We're not debating, councillor.
Okay, I'd like to put down that it is actually to the middle of the year.
I think it's no. Please.
Yeah.
I think it's. Councillor Farrow, I understand what you're trying to do, but it's got to meet, while the intent's there, I think it's got to be possible as well.
Well, I just...
So let me get some clarification on it for you, because there's no point in...
I have been talking to the planning director, and I understand that directors have...
Councillor?
Yeah, thank you.
I'll get some clarification from the director, thanks. Mr Roddich?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In terms of Councillor Farrelly's comment, the planning regulations bring in parking provisions across the state in July this year, so that's why we plan to do the parking plan after that date, so you couldn't do it by the middle of the year. The 2 things to consider here, in terms of what we discussed tonight, was about construction workers parking in the local streets. We're dealing with that now. That doesn't have to be part of the parking plan. The parking plan, what is discussed in this motion, is how we deal with parking going forward in this locality once the shopping centre is up and running. Now, one comment came tonight that the redevelopment may take a number of years. Now, what was meant by the officer's comments was the finalisation of the commercial part of this development, which is the retail component, which we expect to be finished in November and December this year. And that's why Councillor Caddy's recommendation there is appropriate, that we can consider that at that time by the end of the year, once we see how parking actually works in this locality. This is separate to construction workers parking, which we are dealing with now, which I think is where you're looking at.
Are you happy to second that as it is then, Councillor Farrelly?
Yes, I will, and my apologies, because I have
No,
been...
Councillor,
Yeah,
thanks.
no,
we're,
I have
we're
been
we're not debating.
Planning
Yep.
Director.
I know, that's all right.
Yes, all right.
No, and we understand where you're heading with it. Yep, and it's agreed. Okay, is there anyone opposed to this? Councillor Ree. So I'll go to Councillor Caddy to open debate.
Look, I just want to, I suppose, commend the officers. They took a lot of consideration to the motions that were moved at the special electors meeting. I also want to commend the motions that were moved at the special electors meeting, because they were motions that were very reasonable and were things that we could actually take substantial action on. So pretty much all of the points that were raised at the special electors meeting have been addressed. The one that hasn't is the one that we can't address right now, which is the motion to refuse. Until the officer's report comes back in May, Council does not have the full information in front of it, and one of the requirements legislatively is that Council makes its decisions with the full information that is available to it to make those decisions. So making premature decisions is actually something that is contrary to our legislative requirements. That's why that's not up on the board, and I understand why the community would like that to be otherwise, but we are bound, I think, by the legislation that we work under, and that is that we have to wait for the officers' due diligence to be considered before Council can consider a motion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Farrelly, now it is all yours.
All right. Look, I really would like to, since I had the call to help some people at the Karranut Library midway through last year, I would like to actually publicly acknowledge the support of what was then the new director of planning, Stephen Roddick. He made it very much an opportunity to become approachable. I think the community appreciated the fact that this was a different way in which he was willing to look at a very concerning change to their environment. I come from Scarborough. Everyone knows what's happened in Scarborough. You've gone to 2-storey, and we've recently had the 24-storey agreed to by an external authority in Development WA. When this occurred at Karranut, I had gone around lectioneering, and I had found that Karranut people were very happy with the City of Stirling at that time, when they were aware that they were going to have 3 high-rise developments on their doorstep. They'd already had the loss of trees. They'd already had a island down Francis Street that was going to impact on a number of the residents. There was quite a number of issues that came up all of a sudden, and my concern is that at the time was that they were not really aware of all the planning and other things that they could do. And I would have to say the planning department here has been very supportive of supporting those residents. It is no more than what it does, I would say, for the developers when they have questions and queries. I believe we should be absolutely promoting support to communities. They're not experts, and with this public meeting that you had, whenever it was, the electors meeting, that was wonderful to do. It was one of the final decisions at the library, was to somehow, if they were still concerns raised, to have an electors meeting. I congratulate the community on what you've done there. It has come from a basis of having very little knowledge to now running a very tight and informed group. This is a conclusion of some of those things. I, as councillor representing the ward in which these people are living, would like to see that we actually become much more accessible, and that we can actually make them aware that we are certainly endeavouring, and I'll say in regard to Councillor Caddy as well, endeavouring to make this as much as possible to represent your interests. It is not as easy as it sometimes looks, and but thank you very much for, as I said, for the planning department, and I'm extremely happy with the changes that I think have occurred, and have been very supportive of questions that have come from the community. And thank you to the community for therefore following through and really bringing to us now a tight and informed set of questions that we can now act upon and reply to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. A number of questions, please. With regard to page 407, which is motion 4, which is motion 6, sorry, the council considers the city's responsible authority report subsequent. I'm taking on board Councillor Caddy's comments. I could list a few things that we've made decisions on that we didn't have all the information, if we want to go there. But in this, it says, as previously outlined, the application is still under assessment. However, the city advises clause 5.5.1 of Local Planning Scheme 3 would not preclude the city from recommending approval for the application as part of the Responsible Authority report. Could I ask why we could not sit there and recommend non-refusal?
Mr Rodditch.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Reid. Of course, the city could recommend refusal.
There you go.
So there is no reason why, under 6, we couldn't sit there and say that that council considers the city's responsible authority report and information so far and refuse this application.
But we haven't got the responsible authority report. That's the issue, Councillor.
We have a preliminary report that we had presented to council beforehand.
I don't think we... No,
When
we've received
talk-
reports on Karen. We haven't got a responsible authority report.
When we talked, no, probably not the RAR, but we did have a report with when we discussed the library, etc. A while ago. No, we can't base it on that.
Well, my understanding, and I am certainly not the Director of Planning, we can't recommend refusal of something we haven't considered as council. You can certainly put any recommendations you want on top of this to strengthen comments, but you haven't seen the responsible authority report, so you can't endorse it or not endorse it at this stage.
I do believe that there's a way that we can actually say, based on the information we have so far, the council doesn't believe that this is in the best interest of the community. And that could be worded into 6 somehow. If we could lift the screen, please. Above the Mayor's head, please. If we could reword 6, even though we've got the city's response consider, and at this stage, because of lack of community consultation, issues regarding parking, that we would, at this stage, the city does not consider it would be appropriate to approve the...
And Councillor, I understand what you're trying to say. I think the motions that are before you tonight are quite strong. There is no foreseeable reason why the responsible authority report won't come back to council on the 11th of May, and you can do exactly that and endorse a refusal or put a refusal on it, or whatever comes before us, make a decision on that night, and it will be in time to go to the JDAP. I'll get Mr Rodditch to make sure I'm telling the truth.
Councillor Reid, once council considers that responsible authority report, the council can make its own determination whether it supports the officer's recommendation, which it likes to add comments to the officer's recommendation, or is in opposition to the officer's recommendation. And then, as part of that submission to the Joint Development Assessment Panel, becomes the city's recommendation on the application.
That's why he's the director and I'm the mayor. Okay, back to you.
I won't comment on any of that. With 7, I'd like to move that Councillor Farrelly be the amendment, be the elected member to make the deputation. And while I'm saying it now is to give Councillor Farrelly the time to work with the staff with regard to the RAR to make a proper submission. And I think that would be fair on both the councillors, the city and the public, please.
Let's see if Councillor Caddy and Councillor Farrelly are happy to accept that as the amendment.
I'll make, if I am a deputy member of JDAP and I'm not, though, sitting on the panel at JDAP, am I precluded always of speaking, to this sort of report that accompanies the RAR?
Yeah, so the question is, I guess through governance, by Councillor Farrelly making the deputation, obviously she precludes herself from sitting as a JDAP member for this development, but is it...
It
If
does
she's
have
prepared-
repercussions on me as someone who wants to show support, and then I find that it's not possible, and I'm not, though, necessarily ever going to appear on that panel of the JDAP. I mean, there's no real
I
indication.
get it.
Yeah.
Let's get the governance. Yep. Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the first instance, whether Councillor Farrelly is making a decision within this chamber,
Sorry, Councillor Farrell, you should listen to this. Yep.
whether Councillor Farrelly is making a decision within this chamber or within JDAP, Councillor Farrelly will need to bring an independent mind to the decision before her. If she is appointed as the city's representative to make a deputation request to the Metro Inner North Joint Development Assessment Panel, then it would be up to that panel to consider whether she could then sit as a deputy member if a member wasn't available. I think that decision would almost certainly be made by JDAP that she could not sit as a member, and therefore the outcome of that is that she would be able to make a deputation.
So you happy with that? Councillor Caddy, are you happy to accept this as an amendment?
I think it would be safer, given we don't know whether she's going to be called as the deputy JDAP member, to make it both of us, and then we can decide closer to the time which is the most appropriate.
It's my changes. One of the things is, as a JDAP member and having been in the predicament and previously, like most things that go on, there are 4 sitting members. Probability says
yes,
that...
I get it. I get it. So let's...
If Councillor Farrelly does get called up,
I get it, Councillor.
But I think it should be one councillor to allow them to prepare.
So if Councillor Farrell is happy to take that chance, are you happy to accept it, or would you prefer it? I'm not talking to you now. Sorry, Councillor Farrell. Councillor Caddy, you're happy with it. I'm just trying to fast track this. Are you happy with this?
I'm actually happy to leave it as it is, or to put both names. I don't think putting one name leaves. I think it gets a little bit prescriptive, because we could, between now and May, anything could happen.
So the answer is no. So you've got a choice now. You can either put both, or we do it as an amendment and we debate the amendment. Councillor Reid?
Well, actually, this is exciting when I think about what happened last week.
And considering this is going to come back to us, do you want to spend this time tonight debating a name on this?
I think so. Why not?
No, and you are welcome to.
That's it. I do, because I think the way things are going at the moment with people's names popping into things, why not? It's good fun.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure what just happened, Councillor Reid. Were you trying to seek an amendment, or are you just happy to let it go?
No, I'm actually seeking an amendment then, that we can actually vote on it, because we have to go forward.
Okay, that's okay. I just wasn't sure. Councillor Farrelly, so we do need a seconder that Councillor Farrelly is a name that goes on there. No, you've moved it, you can't second it. Is there a seconder for this? If not,
I'll second it.
it's too late. Councillor Spagnuolo has seconded it. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Sandri? Would you like to... Are we happy to vote on this, Councillor Reid, or would you like to open debate on a name?
No, look, I think it says it all. I think if those in the gallery were here last council meeting, I think they would understand that this is, I think, whatever's going forward.
Point of order.
Okay.
Whatever has happened at a previous council meeting has no bearing on this. We're voting on who gets to make a deputation to JDAP.
Right.
I could say processes, but I'm not going to debate across the table.
Councillor Reid, can we just stick to this?
I'm just saying that, look, I do believe that after what happened with Yellow, and I won't go through that again because, Mr Mayor, you haven't come back to me with that one.
Can we stick to this item, Councillor?
Well, it's exactly the same. I think that if we're going to, as a council, do a deputation, that's where it first came out, we have to be prepared and we have to support our community. That is why we are here. We're elected by the people to represent the people. This gives an opportunity for this council to sit there and actually say more and really...
You're debating the item now, Councillor. Councillor, the whole council, no, please in the gallery.
Isn't that what you're asking me to do?
No, you're debating the amendment. The council has not, this as an actual point, number 7, is not disagreed with council. We're talking about a name. So you're now talking as if council doesn't agree with the deputation. And that's not the case. So it is a point, councillor. We're talking about a name.
No, yes, my point is that what happened last time where a lot of people could have done it, It didn't go well. Having a person.
Okay, so you've made your point. You say you want it to be this name.
That's because Councillor Farrelly is the ward councillor. She's familiar with it. She can work with the staff. She's got the best opportunity if we give her a month's head up to make it better. And that's why her presentation could be quite key to getting the JDAP to cross the line. We only need one.
Right, that's okay.
3 against 5.
Yeah, I just need to get clarification from Mr. Roddick here.
Just through the chair.
Councillors? Councillors?
Councillor Rees.
I just need to get some clarification on something.
Through the chair, the officers' report is independent from council, so there'd be no councillor working with officers on the recommendation. Council would consider the recommendation as a body once that's submitted.
Yep. I think what's important in this, especially for those people listening in the gallery, this isn't about a single councillor making a deputation. It's about someone representing council's views at a deputation of JDAP. And previously, Councillor Farrelly didn't do a deputation. It was not because of Councillor Farrelly, it was because she sits on JDAP and it was seen to be a conflict. And that's what we're debating at the moment, whether it's appropriate. So, Councillor Spagnola, you seconded this amendment?
Yes, that's right, Mr. Mayor. Look, I don't know whether I want to add to this. All I can say is that I think Councillor Ree has covered it well. Look, there is an issue with process here as far as I'm concerned. We saw it at the last council meeting and we're seeing it again this evening. A motion was put forward, an amendment, seeking Councillor Farrelly to be the representative. And I think that's a fair motion. I think Councillor Farrelly is quite capable of getting involved with the role. Perhaps Councillor Caddy may consider being the deputy in the event that Councillor Farrelly cannot make it. I think that's probably a better arrangement. I mean, the Manager of Governance has already explained the implications. Councillor Farrelly is happy to accept those implications. I don't understand why Councillor Caddy is insisting.
I don't think Councillor Caddy has had a chance to talk on this yet. So, Councillor Sandri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only reason why I will be voting against the amendment for the inclusion of Councillor Felicity Farrelly's name is because I actually think the scale of this development is something that warrants the Mayor to attend and represent Council on this. And I think that we're also best placed to make sure that we enact the Mayor to do it when the responsible authority report comes, because in that way we're clear in terms of whether the officers are recommending approval or refusal and how strong we need to go up against the JDAP with this respect. So in my opinion, I think it would be premature to allocate someone, and second to that, I also think it would be appropriate for the Mayor to represent Council on this occasion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this amendment? Councillor Caddy?
Look, I just want to make it clear that I'm not at all opposed to Councillor Farrelly making this deputation. However, I think in May we could find that Councillor Farrelly has been asked to sit on JDAP, or that it would be more appropriate for the Mayor to speak, or that one of us is ill. So I think having council resolution that we name a particular person limits our options. But I'm certainly not opposed to Councillor Farrelly being allowed to make that deputation. It's certainly not a contest in any way, but I do actually support the recommendation that the Mayor would be an appropriate person to make the deputation, given the significance of this development.
Is there anyone else who would like to debate this?
Look, if I may, through you,
yes?
Mr. Mayor, this is not something that I knew was going to be raised tonight. I actually haven't even discussed anything like this with Councillor Ree. However, in those days when I met everyone at the Karrinyup Library, I really did feel like I was traipsing nearly over to support and help them. And it is something that I really do feel concerned about. I actually had my first job at the new Karrinyup Shopping Centre. And so I've had a long association with it. I know what it was like and I know what it's turning into be. And I've also connected with the people in the development industry. That's beside the point. And I do also concur with Councillor Sandri that the impact of this development on the community is, I think it's changing the whole lifestyle and amenity of the area.
Let's just try to stick to this item.
And, all right, I would not go against having the mayor as the person that spoke, because I feel that it's such a pivotal change to one of the areas in the coastal ward. And I was going to say something, it's completely left my mind. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, just to be clear though,
but-
if you're voting for this, you're voting so the mayor doesn't speak at that.
That the mayor doesn't speak.
Yeah, doesn't. I'm just saying we have to be clear. This is being very prescriptive. That is saying that you will be speaking at the JDAP.
I know.
Can I just have a point of clarification, Mr Mayor? Let's say, for example, this amendment did not carry through. There's an opportunity, and my understanding is that when the responsible authority report comes, at that point we can actually allocate someone to speak to JDAP.
I think there's a few points coming up tonight, and that is, I get what people are trying to do in terms of certainty and provide comfort to the people in the gallery as well. But remember that this is a separate process. We haven't received the RRR, and barring some bizarre outcome, the RAR is coming to us before it goes to JDAP. So you'll get a chance to do all of this at that point on the 11th of May. Councillor Farrelly, would you like to continue? I don't know if we cut you off or if you'd finished.
I feel in a very difficult position, actually, because it is something I'm quite passionate about, and this is having lived in Scarborough and having seen what has happened there, and we don't have a JDAP to even air our views at or get some councillor. Yeah, this is relevant, is the fact that to have someone passionate to do that.
Sure.
And I'd like to thank Councillor Reid, but in terms of what we can, and if you can represent the council to that, and I don't know the ramifications of that, and our lawyer here should be able to tell us that, is that possible for the mayor to be the person to make a deputation request on behalf of the council?
Yes, it's up to the council. It's up to the council to decide who does it.
So you're not prevented from doing it because you're the mayor?
No. No, I don't even need a lawyer for that.
No, I just wondered because sometimes, you know, you're representing and speaking.
But,
yeah.
is it? Surely we're not going to have too much more debate on this item now. Councillor Proud?
Here we go.
We're debating these three words in yellow. That's all we're debating.
Mr Mayor, this is a $800 million redevelopment at Karrinyup. And everybody's living the nightmare.
Add some more zeros,
We've got an
Councillor.
RAR coming through on the 17th, right?
11th.
Sorry, the 11th, and yep, okay. We need to inform ourselves, and we need to leave that open. Anything could happen between now and then. People get hit by buses every day, you know, leave it.
Councillor, I think you should probably retract that.
Look, I'll withdraw it, but anything could happen. We could have another lockdown. Anything could happen. Leave it open. We can decide on the 11th, if that's the meeting date. Why are we pressuring ourselves? I'm sure the Karrinyup people will be really happy to come along again and hear, or their ward councillors will certainly let them know they can live stream. This is why we've got it. So this is not a big deal. This is not a rush, but you have got an $800 million development underway, and we need to be responsible enough to be making ourselves informed. So I can't support this. I'm happy with the blank line at the moment until we get to May.
Thank you. Councillor Ree, you want to close that debate?
Yep, love it. I think that the intention is quite clear. I think in order to ensure that the information that may be from the public is channelled through so that Councillor Farrelly can get additional information from the staff if need be, with not interfering at all with the RAR. Secondly, when the RAR comes to council,
Councillor Proud, I can hear you.
If the mayor is available, thank you, Mr Mayor, that was nice of you. If the mayor is available when the RAR report does come in and we have an idea when the JDAP is, there's nothing for council to just sit there and say, right, the mayor can attend. But at this stage, if he's not available...
No, let's clarify that. This is already, we'd have to rescind this motion. You are putting a motion tonight that precludes the Mayor from speaking. And this isn't in defence of myself, this is just saying that's what this motion is.
Not really. We can actually do another motion to say that you can speak as well. We don't
No,
have to
I don't.
Mr Mayor, can I have a point of clarification, please?
Yeah, let me just finish this first. I don't believe we can have two people speaking unless maybe I'm wrong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The request for a deputation will be dealt with by the JDAP itself. Mr Roddick may be able to indicate whether two would be allowed to speak or not.
Mr Roddick?
Through the chair, looking at other JDAPs from local governments, more than one elected member can speak. I don't think it's probably the best way to put a united council decision across. However, that's up for the council to decide.
Thank you for that. I have the floor.
Sorry, Councillor, let's just get a clarification on that.
It's just a clarification. Bear with me. If we endorse this amendment now, do we have to rescind the motion in order to put someone else in there, for example, the Mayor?
Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As a revocation motion is required when a motion has been adopted but not implemented. So this motion won't be implemented until the deputation is made to the JDAP. If Council wanted to add the Mayor, in addition to Councillor Farrelly, a revocation motion would not be required. If Council wanted to replace Councillor Farrelly with the Mayor, a revocation motion would be required.
Thank you. Councillor Reid. Sorry, Councillor Spagnola. Is there just
a point of clarification, Mr Mayor. I was just going to say, my understanding is, as Mayor, you're actually ex officio on all committees and any other representation that the city is required to make, unless that's changed.
Mr Blanchard?
The Mayor is the spokesperson for the City of Stirling. Whether that would entitle the Mayor to make a deputation to JDAP when Council had resolved otherwise is not a question I've considered before, and it would potentially be something the Mayor would be reluctant to do if Council had resolved that another councillor is to make that deputation. I think it would potentially put the Mayor in a difficult position.
And I could speak on behalf of myself and say that I would not speak without Council endorsement to go to a JDAP. But can I also mention that this debate on one name has gone on long enough? People from the Karen Up group are actually leaving the room. Councillor Reid?
Okay, I'll just finish off by saying exactly, we can actually have one more person speak if need be. If it comes to the RAR, then Council just endorses the Mayor to speak as well if he's available. Secondly, I'd just like to say Council did not endorse Councillor Caddy to actually talk at that yellow.
Point of order, that is incorrect. Council did endorse Councillor Caddy to speak at the yellow.
Thank you.
Not endorsed beforehand.
Yes, they did, Councillor.
We didn't. We endorsed the piece of paper to speak. We didn't endorse.
Oh, it was a council resolution.
Councillor, thanks.
So
it was no, please. That is not correct. Councillor Reid?
Happy to get that form out. Is there any reason why we can't put the Mayor in this as well? Now?
No, let's just, you're closing debate. You're closing debate on this amendment now. You are not going to change it now. You can't do an amendment till you close.
Well, we could foreshadow an amendment to include both. We could.
You're closing debate, Councillor.
I'm closing the debate because I think it's gone on too far. It should have been a lot simpler. The intent was there just to make sure people were heard and enough information was there. It was not against the Mayor at all. It wasn't against the fact of the spokesperson at the city. That wasn't the intent. It was just making sure that we actually had a process of communication.
All right,
and it can be subjected to change when we have the RAR.
No, it can't. No, we've had clarification on that. Let's be really clear, we don't give furphies out here. This cannot, it's not subject to change. This is a motion you're putting up now. So we have the amendment, it's closed debate. This is purely on these three words that Councillor Felicity Farrelly make the deputation. So we're just voting on this amendment. If please go to the vote, councillors. I think we're missing some, are we? Councillor Proud? There's 2 out. Yep. Thank you. And that motion is lost. All right, we go back to the substantive motion. For all those watching at home going, what just happened? It hasn't changed anything to do with the motion we're debating, and at the 11th of May we'll decide which person from council makes a deputation in line with number 7. We now go back to the substantive. I believe, yes you do. Councillor Reid.
Okay, with number 3, on the officers' report 402, it actually says, in relation to personal parking, the current site management plan does not permit contractors to park on the Carrinup Shopping Centre site. Parking is provided off-site, blah, 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 as raised today by quite a few members of the gallery. That and I believe the director did speak to AMP about it as well. Is there any reason why we can't give the residents and ratepayers in those adjoining streets a parking permit at no cost, so they have a sticker on their car or a number of cars for each property, and if they don't show a sticker, then they get fined. And that way it would be easier for the rangers to ascertain whether or not they are tradies, undesirables or locals.
I'll get Mr Quirk. It's certainly not that easy, Councillor Reid. There's a huge unintended consequence when you start doing that. Mr Quirk?
Through you, Mr Mayor, look, that certainly is one of the enforcement or parking restriction considerations that we will look at, but as Mr Mayor mentions, that is a very significant shift, which does have some unintended consequences that go with it. So certainly that longer term parking management plan that we need to look at when the majority of the retail development is complete, that certainly is something that needs to be considered, not necessarily a solution in the short term to deal with the contractor parking.
I think that is the problem, Mr Mayor. There's an issue right now. How long do we have to wait for the development? 5 years before it actually gets addressed? It's a bit like the development in Churchlands. We have to wait for it to be finished in order to get the footpath, and that's been going before I was born.
Let's keep it on this.
So, you know, I just think that we could do something. There should be something.
I think, let me clarify, there is a commitment from the director to do something now. There is a director. They are looking at the moment to come up with a solution. There's just the holistic plan of what you're talking about requires a huge time frame with consultation, etc.
It's just that I think with 3, we could, maybe with the wording of it, that we could actually say something, you know, it says before the end of this year. Can't we sort of put some time frames a little bit? I mean, that's still
No, but again, I think the clarification for this isn't what you're talking about. You're talking about protecting the amenity of the residents right now.
Yeah.
This is about the parking plan for the whole commercial centre once it's done. They're different items. Mr Rodich?
Through the chair, recommendation 2 deals with the current construction workers parking, and we'll deal with that through the current site management plan, which is being reviewed at the moment. Point 3 is regarding the parking plan for the future, I guess, policing of parking in the locality, and we need to look at a number of mechanisms, as Mr Quirk has pointed out.
Okay, I just feel that there should be some more time frame into it. That's my comment. I'm also a bit concerned that the city approved the development application for a temporary car park at Tassels in Innaloo. Who sits there and carries a great big tin as a tradie on the bus from Tassels over to Carrinup? I mean, is that not a bit far for a tradie to go?
Well,
I just thought that was a very odd... We've got nothing closer?
No, they're certainly not walking with their toolboxes to Carrinup, Councillor. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I'll go to Councillor Caddy to close debate. She's happy to leave that. That is closed. Move Councillor Caddy, seconded Councillor Farrelly. I'll put that to the vote. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Can I also, at this stage, thank those residents of Carron Up who've attended this meeting, but also the special electors meeting, and for the considered approach in putting these motions forward. Now move on to item 13.2, the proposed 28 multiple dwellings amendment, lot 90, house number 38, Jennifer Street, and lot 89, house number 59, Hertha Road, Innaloo, on page 493. This was pulled in. Sorry, we do need to bring some councillors back into the room. No. Or we got more to leave? Yep. So Councillor Sandri is also leaving the room. And the other councillors are remaining outside. And Councillor Proud, you have a recommendation.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation on page 493.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Ree, with an amendment. Let's hear what your amendment is.
Other than, without going to another crazy debate, take out my name, namely Councillor Elizabeth Ree, and just leave it as an elected member in case we have to do a deputation, just for consistency.
Yep. Are you happy to accept that as an amendment, Councillor Proud? Sure, there you go. So we have a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone opposed to this? If not, I will put that item. That is Councillor Lagan. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Now let's get those three councillors back in. Councillors, I'm sitting here as you're saying that. This is the RAR that's been called. So this is a time to decide who. I know it's already been moved and seconded, but will you just sort this out outside or in the playground? Well, I've just got to check what the resolution is because it might also be ultra vires. Might not be able to make. I know we've made a decision, but where is it? The addition we put in there that at the time. This is the time of consideration of the responsible. We're endorsing the responsible authorities report, so we can't say at the time of the responsible authority, because that's now. So let's just get clarification from the Manager of Governance. Here's a tricky one for you. I know we've moved a motion, but it's a pretty well a nonsense motion. Mr. Blanchard, how did we deal with this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you've identified, this is a difficult item, given that Council has both adopted the RAR and also resolved to consider appointing an elected member when it adopts the RAR. There are two approaches that Council could take. It could consider a revocation motion, or it could consider a pragmatic approach where an elected member is sent to make a deputation on behalf of Council.
Councillor Ree?
Okay, based on the fun in the factory, why don't we do recommendation 3, that, which is an additional one, then we don't have to, although there's nothing wrong with a revocation motion, we can get 5.
I don't even know if we need a motion for this. If it's something we just want to...
I would just say recommendation 3, that the elected members are either the councillor, the mayor, myself, councillor Proud, if...
Well, that's basically what this is saying now, so if we're...
Yeah.
All right, so we'll sort it out outside is what you're saying.
No, well, I'm saying whether or not you actually have to name someone here.
Yep. Well,
That's what
we
I'm
don't
saying.
have to, but I just wanted to clarify that we sort of,
Yeah.
this was the time. All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's leave it at that.
Mr Mayor, just to let you know, Councillor Farrelly has left because of the impartial interest. Jada?
Yeah, I don't think she has to leave because of the...
She erred on the side of caution and she decided to leave.
Okay. Was she out for the vote? No, she was here for the vote, so there's no point.
If any changes were going to be made,
There's no changes and she's already voted on the actual RAR. Let's get all those councillors back in the room. Councillor, why they're coming back in?
I was just going to say, Mr Mayor, if it does help, maybe a third option would be to move that the item be recommitted and then we can deal with it.
I think we can just deal with it outside. I think it's fine. Yeah, I think everyone's happy with that. We're just waiting for I'm assuming Councillor Proud's getting the councillors. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Item 13.3, Annual Report 2019-2020 on page 672. An absolute majority vote is required. Councillor Lagan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Boothman seconded that. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree? Councillor Lagan?
Nothing to add.
Councillor Boothman? Councillor Ree?
And the comments I've made previously about using state and federal members for parliament in all our publications, which I don't think are appropriate. I think it's important. This is a local government. It's residents, ratepayers and councillors. That's it. I said it before, I don't believe we should have photos of anybody else in there.
Thank you, Councillor Ree, and I understand the point you're making. I think my personal view, this is very important that we recognise that it's an apolitical publication, but those members who are in government who support council during that time, it would be entirely appropriate to understand that their photos are going to appear in there if they've been part of a project or a funding commitment in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's certainly an apolitical, and both sides are normally represented in there.
I'm confused, Mr Mayor, because that would imply that every politician, every federal or state member of parliament that assisted us should have their photo in there, not just one or two.
Not at all.
Oh. Okay. I didn't understand.
Is there anyone who'd like to speak to the annual report or against? No. In that case, I'll go. Councillor Lagan, if you would like to close, you're welcome to.
Nothing to add.
Thank you. I will put that to the vote then. Thank you. Councillors. Noting that all councillors are back in the room. Thank you. Sorry, I just need to see that back. It did have a councillor struck out on that vote list that was in front of me. Was that? No, so they're all... So on this vote, I can't see Councillor Farrelly and she's in the room. Is that... She did vote? Yeah, she was here for the vote because I saw... Yep, there you go. Great. That's it. So that motion is carried with Councillor Ree voting against. Item 14, motions of which previous notice has been given. Item 14.1, notice of motion Councillor Felicity Farrelly on the beach access matting at Brighton Beach, Scarborough. 676 with an alt rec on 679. Councillor Farrelly, your motion.
Yes, I'd like to put the alternative motion.
Thank you. And Councillor, is there a seconder? Councillor Ree. Is there anyone opposed? I will put that vote, noting that Miss Pickering is leaving the room to celebrate her birthday. Okay, councillors, we're waiting for Councillor Farrelly and Councillor Sargent to vote, I believe. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 14.2, notice of motion, Councillor David Lagan, superannuation for elected members, 680. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation. There is no alt. There's the recommendation on page 680.
Thank you. And it's seconded, Councillor Migdale. Is anyone opposed? Question?
I do believe that this was raised at North Zone a couple of years ago. I just wondered whether or not that could be included in the report, because it's not. Thank you.
Thank you. I will put that if no one's opposed. Just waiting for Councillor Proud. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 14.3, notice of motion, Councillor David Lagan, parking and security fleet vehicles to be electric vehicles by 2024. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you. I'll move the suggested alternative recommendation. I would like to add a point C.
It's your motion.
If I could just get advice from either officers or the CEO. The point C I'd like to add is that we include point C, possible PPP for vehicle supply provision be investigated, so that we put to the marketplace, to Toyota or to Isuzu or whoever, would you like to give us the vehicles or have us use the vehicles for a period of time? We'll have your branding.
Yeah, I think you don't want PPP. Yeah.
Not a price promotion, no.
I don't think we're allowed to, but...
yeah, that's why I'm seeking advice. Are we allowed to do that?
No, otherwise I'd be driving one, councillor.
If not, I'm happy to leave it as it is.
I think we can cover that in point A, Councillor Lagan, so we understand the intent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then I'll leave it as it is.
All right, Councillor Sundry has seconded. She was jumping out of the seat well before you guys.
Do we not want comment from Councillor Caddy, who's an expert on the area?
Yes.
I'm actually wondering whether I needed to declare impartiality.
Yes. All right, let's put that to the vote. We've got a couple to go. Councillor Perkoff, Hatton, Boothman. Thanks, councillors. That is unanimous. Brings us to item 15, notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting. Councillor Ree.
Oops. Thank you. Expand the morning and afternoon parking restrictions to the whole of Churchlands Estate to ensure the safety of road users and pedestrians, etc., as outlined in the petition as tabled at the 13th of March council meeting. Reasons for motion: the increase in the poor driving ability and poor attitude by road users in the area is compromising the safety and well-being of the local residents and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other notice of motions? Councillor Farrelly, you have one.
That a crosswalk be installed at North Beach and at Benyon Street, or propose, or how could I say it better than that? That a deputy, well, we've investigated it already, I think, but I think now we've got to get to that point where we actually have that land on the ground, because we've been asking for crosswalks with main roads for about the last 18, well, however long I've been on council.
You can't debate it. Let's just have the motion. So the council installs crosswalk at Benyon Street
and North Beach.
And North Beach on West Coast Drive. That will do. And is there any other notice of motion? Then I'll go to item 16, which is questions by members of which due notice has been given. I have nil. Item 17, new business of an urgent nature. I have nil. Item 18, matters behind closed doors. I have nil. And 19 is closure. And I declare the meeting closed at 9:28 p.m. Thanks everyone for your attendance. Thanks those members of the gallery who stuck it out to the end. To those viewers at home and to those left in the gallery, a very happy Easter. Enjoy your time with your families. Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank
Bye
you,
for
Mayor.
now.